They always come back. But when they do, it's never random, it's strategy. That single notification glowing on your screen isn't love. It's a probe, a test, a small piece of psychological warfare wrapped in four harmless words: I've been thinking. Right now, someone watching this has that exact message on their phone. Maybe it arrived last night. Maybe it's still sitting unread while your heart races half hope, half dread. You wonder if this time is different. You want to believe it means affection, but the truth, it means power. They don't miss you. They miss the control they had over you. That message is bait, and if you bite, you hand them back everything you fought to reclaim. So here's your preview. If you respond at all, it won't be fast, and it won't be emotional, it will be delayed, and cut down to just 2 words. Later, I'll reveal why this tiny move destroys their illusion of control. But first, you need to understand the game they're playing. This is where strategic silence becomes your greatest weapon. Not revenge, not cruelty, but dignity. Tonight, I'll show you how silence flips the roles, turning the hunter into the hunted. Think about the last time your phone lit up with a name you had worked so hard to forget. Maybe it was an ex who ghosted you, a friend who vanished when things got hard, or a coworker who only appeared when they needed something. You'd been healing, rebuilding, finally breathing again. Then buzz, a message. Hey, been thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. 3 short sentences, harmless in appearance, yet heavy with poison, because behind those words lies something far darker than care control. Your body reacts before your mind does. Heart racing, chest tightening, adrenaline spiking as if you're in danger. But you're not being chased by a predator. You're looking at pixels on a screen, and yet the effect is the same. You feel ambushed, destabilized. Why? Because you've been conditioned. Silence creates an ache. When someone cuts you off, your brain interprets absence as rejection. Over time, that absence becomes a wound begging for closure. When the message finally comes, the wound is touched and your nervous system leaps into chaos. That simple hey works like Pavlov's bell, triggering the reaction you've been trained to give. Here's the brutal truth: they don't reach out when their life is full. They don't text when their new relationship is satisfying or when their ego is fed. They text when supply dries up, when validation wells run empty. And if you answer instantly, you confirm what they wanted to know. You're still available, still waiting, still controllable. That's why so many people fall for the trap. You mistake the message for longing. You convince yourself it's regret. You read manipulation as affection. But the reality, it's a test. And you are the subject. Watch the pattern. They vanish when commitment is needed. They reappear when ego is starving. They ghost when consistency is required. They breadcrumb when they need control. This isn't confusion, it's deliberate. Each time you answer quickly, you tell them silence is a tactic that works. You reward their absence. You make their cycle stronger. Here's the hardest part: you don't fall into the trap because you're foolish. You fall because you want to be mature. You believe replying kindly shows growth. But in this game, politeness is surrender. What you call maturity is permission. Think of the friend who ghosts for weeks, then writes, "Sorry, I've just been busy." You know they weren't too busy, they just chose not to care. But if you respond warmly, you erase the consequence. They learn they can vanish anytime, and your forgiveness will always be waiting. Or the ex who reappears at midnight with thinking about you. They're not cherishing your memory. They're checking if the hook still pierces your skin. And if you reply at 12:01, you've told them exactly what they wanted. Yes, you still have power over me. This is why it feels almost impossible to resist. Their silence planted doubt in you. Was I too harsh? Did I push them away? Should I give them another chance? The message seems like an answer, but it's not. It's bait designed to drag you back into the loop. And once you reply, the damage goes deeper than you realize. You train them to see your silence as temporary. You confirm your boundaries were just theater. You tell them your dignity can be dismantled with a single notification. Over time, this erodes your self-respect. You begin to believe you're weak, not strong. Here's the vicious cycle. They disappear. They return. They test. You react. They vanish again. And each time they're reinforced, silence works. You'll always be there. Their control is intact. But here's the awakening once you see their message for what it truly is. Not love, not reconnection, but reconnaissance. You can begin to break free. You can recognize their words as not a bridge, but a probe. Not affection, but measurement. They're not checking in on you. They're checking if you're still under control. Most people know this deep down, but they still respond. Why? Because silence feels unbearable. The discomfort of not answering convinces them they'll lose their chance forever. They confuse silence with weakness. But in reality, silence is strength. That's why strategic silence matters so much. It's not avoidance, it's clarity. It's not coldness, it's control. And it's the only way to show both to them and to yourself that you've changed. So ask yourself this, when they text after weeks or months, do you want to hand them back control? Or do you want to make this the moment you flip the script forever? Because the truth is simple, their silence was never about you. It was about them. And their return isn't proof of growth. It's proof of hunger. Hunger for validation, hunger for control. And once you see that clearly, you can begin to respond differently, not with desperation, not with anger, but with discipline. If you want to master this game, you need to understand the psychology of the person sending that message. Because the truth is, they're not running from your love. They're running from themselves. Psychologists draw a sharp line between guilt and shame. Guilt says I did something wrong. Shame says I am something wrong. When someone ghosts you, avoids you, or vanishes without a word, it isn't always about punishing you. More often, it's because they can't face themselves. They disappear when their shame becomes unbearable. They vanish because your presence reminds them of what they don't want to admit. But shame doesn't vanish just because they go silent. It lingers, it festers, and eventually it pushes them to act. That "hey, been thinking about you" isn't an apology. It isn't love. It's a pressure valve. Their shame built up until they needed to release it, and your inbox became the easiest place to dump it. Here's where most people deceive themselves. They treat silence as a mistake. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they were confused. Maybe they didn't know how to handle their feelings. But mistakes are occasional. Patterns are repetitive. And when you zoom out, you see the pattern. They disappear whenever things get real. They reappear when their ego is starving. They avoid depth but send crumbs. They ghost when you need consistency and resurface when they need control. That's not confusion. That's strategy. And if you respond, you're not forgiving a mistake, you're rewarding a pattern. This is where strategic silence shines. Because you can't argue someone out of a pattern. You can't beg them into self-awareness. You can't reason with their shame. The only way to disrupt the cycle is to stop feeding it. And silence starves it better than anything else. Let's expose the common tactics manipulators use when they resurface. 1. Breadcrumbing, sending vague casual messages. "Hey, miss you, hope you're good." Just enough to hook your attention, never enough to commit. 2. Intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes hot, sometimes cold. Reply today, vanish tomorrow. This is the same psychology that makes slot machines addictive. You never know when the next reward is coming. 3. Gaslighting by absence. Their silence makes you doubt yourself. You start asking, was I too much? Did I ruin it? Their lack of contact manipulates you into blaming yourself. 4. Boundary testing. The message itself is a test. If you reply quickly, they know your silence was temporary. If you reply emotionally, they know they still control your peace. These aren't random accidents. They're deliberate maneuvers designed to measure your leash. Here's the trap they love to hide behind: confusion. I didn't know what I wanted. I was going through things. I needed space. These excuses sound innocent, but they camouflage the real pattern. Confusion doesn't repeat. Strategy does. If they ghosted you once, maybe it was confusion. If they've done it 5 times, it's not confusion, it's training. They're teaching you that they can vanish and return whenever they want, and you'll always open the door. And each time you answer warmly, you teach them that the training worked. The Stoics saw through this centuries ago. Epictetus wrote, "When you surrender your power of choice to another, you become their slave." That's exactly what happens when you let their breadcrumb drag you into reaction. You hand over choice. You become predictable. Marcus Aurelius called the mind a citadel, a fortress no one can breach unless you open the gates. Every time you rush to reply, you swing those gates wide, and they march right in, carrying shame, control, and manipulation with them. Strategic silence is how you keep the gates shut. It's how you remind yourself their message isn't a gift, it's a test. And the fortress doesn't crumble just because a pebble hits the wall. Here's the dark irony: they can't stop this cycle even if they wanted to. They are enslaved to their ego, their insecurity, their endless need for validation. They ghost you not because you lack value, but because they can't handle consistency. They return not because they love you, but because their ego demands food. And when you reply, you feed it. You become their reliable source of supply. Their message isn't love, it's addiction. And you are the slot machine that always pays out. Unless you stop playing, unless you use silence as discipline, unless you let them sit in the discomfort of being ignored. Manipulators thrive on reaction. To them, reaction equals relevance. If you rage, you prove they still matter. If you plead, you prove they still matter. Even if you reply coldly, but instantly, you prove they still matter. Indifference is the one thing they cannot process. That's why strategic silence is devastating. It doesn't give them anger. It doesn't give them nostalgia. It gives them nothing. And nothing is unbearable. The real power move comes when you stop asking, why did they ghost me? Why did they come back, and start asking, why am I giving them the privilege of a reaction? Because here's the truth: their actions say everything about them. Your silence says everything about you. And in that moment, you stop being the subject of their experiment and start becoming the master of your own fortress. Knowledge is powerful, but in the middle of emotional chaos, theory often fails. When your phone buzzes at midnight and your body surges with adrenaline, you don't need another lecture, you need an anchor. Something simple, visual, unforgettable. That's why we turn to metaphor. The 2 images you must carry with you, the mirror and the fortress, transform silence from passive absence into active strength. Imagine standing before a flawless mirror. Every time they message you, they step in front of it expecting to see you, your longing, your eagerness, your emotional availability. But when you practice strategic silence, they don't see you at all. They see themselves. Their hey reflects back as emptiness. Their been thinking about you reflects back as loneliness. Their hope you're doing well reflects back as neediness. That's the hidden violence of silence. It doesn't shout, it exposes. It doesn't argue, it reveals. When you hold the mirror steady, they are forced to face what they spend their life avoiding: their own emptiness. And emptiness terrifies them. Now picture a fortress on a hill. Stone walls, rising gates, sealed towers, watchful. Every vague message they send, short, casual, manipulative, is nothing more than a pebble tossed at those walls. They expect the gates to swing open the way they used to, but this time they remain closed. The fortress doesn't chase attackers down the hill. It doesn't shout from the walls. It doesn't explain itself, it stands. That is the image of strategic silence. You are not running away. You are not playing games. You are simply standing guard over your dignity, refusing to grant access to someone who forfeited the right to enter. In high-emotion moments, logic collapses, but a symbol cuts through the fog. When you feel the urge to reply, repeat to yourself, "I am the mirror. I am the fortress." Suddenly, the situation transforms. You are no longer the hunted, you are the stronghold. The mirror reminds you that their words expose them, not you. The fortress reminds you that strength doesn't chase, it endures. Together, these images convert silence from weakness into power. Most people misunderstand silence. They think it's passive, cowardly, even rude. But strategic silence is deliberate action. It is not what you do when you have nothing to say. It's what you do when you have everything to protect. Think of martial arts. The most powerful move isn't always a strike. It's the restraint, the refusal to take the bait, the ability to let your opponent exhaust themselves while you remain calm and grounded. That's silence. Their energy drains while yours remains untouched. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius described the mind as a citadel, a fortress within yourself that no one can breach without your permission. Epictetus taught insult only wounds if you decide it does. Translate that to today: a text message can only control you if you decide it matters. Otherwise, it's just letters on a screen. Silence proves that truth in action. Seneca once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In this context, that means don't ghost, don't play games, don't manipulate back. Simply guard your fortress, simply hold up the mirror. When the notification appears, stop, breathe. Picture the fortress walls, picture the mirror's reflection. Ask yourself, am I about to open the gates for someone who abandoned me? Am I about to hand them a reflection that validates their ego? If the answer is yes, then silence is your shield, because every second you hold it, you reinforce the image fortress, unbroken mirror, unyielding. From their side, this is devastating. They expected you to collapse. They expected instant availability. Instead, they're staring at silence that feels heavier than any words. They check their phone again and again. They draft follow-up messages, each one shorter, more desperate. The fortress doesn't move. The mirror doesn't blink. And with every hour that passes, their certainty cracks. They begin to realize the version of you they once controlled has disappeared. A single act of silence is powerful. Repeated acts of silence become transformation. Each time you choose not to answer, you etch discipline deeper into your character. Over time, silence becomes your reflex, your new normal. The mirror and fortress aren't just metaphors, they become your identity. You don't have to remind yourself as often, because indifference has replaced desperation. Strategic silence is no longer practice. It's who you are. Here's the paradox: the less you do, the more power you hold. While they flail for attention, you stay still. While they chase, you conserve. While they search for cracks, you show none. And this power isn't about revenge. It's about freedom. It's about proving to yourself that your peace is more important than their validation. Never forget, silence without metaphor feels empty. Silence with metaphor feels strong. That's why you must carry the mirror and the fortress. Because when you do, you never confuse silence with weakness again. You know that every unanswered message is not avoidance, but affirmation. I am unbroken. I am untouchable. I am the fortress. Ideas inspire, but stories transform. It's one thing to hear that silence is power. It's another to see it play out in real lives. Let's walk through 3 scenarios that mirror situations you've likely experienced yourself. Sarah had been strong for 3 months. After years of letting her ex dictate the rhythm of her life, appearing when convenient, vanishing When bored, she finally went no contact. She rebuilt piece by piece. She stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes. She began to sleep peacefully again. Then at 2:14 a.m., her phone buzzed. A simple message. "Hey, beautiful." Her body betrayed her instantly. Heart racing. Breath caught. Old feelings surging back like a flood. In the past, she would have written paragraphs, desperate to prove she was still worth something. But this time she remembered the fortress. She remembered the mirror. She placed the phone face down, took a breath, and chose strategic silence. The next morning she woke lighter, not heavier. Nothing collapsed. The world kept spinning. Her dignity remained intact. Meanwhile, her ex sent 3 more messages, each one shorter, more desperate, more insecure. By the end of the week, the stream ran dry. Sarah hadn't lost him that night. She had lost the illusion that he still owned her. That was her victory. John was reliable, the one who carried projects, stayed late, did the heavy lifting. But his colleague Michael had a habit disappearing during the hard work, then resurfacing just in time to collect credit. Weeks of silence in the group chat. Then 2 days before the deadline, Michael typed, "Hey team, how's everything going? Just checking in." In the past, John would have scrambled to update him, writing long messages, reassuring him, making him feel included. But this time, John remembered the mirror. He remembered the fortress. He let the message hang. No eager recap. No reassurance. Silence. When presentation day arrived, John's work spoke for itself. Michael had nothing to show. His attempt to ride the wave collapsed because no one handed him the surfboard. Strategic silence had exposed the pattern without a single confrontation. The office saw the truth. Michael wasn't a team player, he was a passenger. Sometimes the hardest silence is with family. David's older brother had a pattern he mocked. David dismissed his successes, disappeared when things went well. But whenever money troubles hit, he came back, suddenly warm, suddenly in need. After 6 months of no contact, David's phone lit up. "Little bro, I'm in trouble. Can you help me out?" In the past, guilt would have driven David. He would have sent money hoping for approval that never came. But this time he paused. He remembered silence is not cruelty. It is clarity. He didn't reply immediately. He let the message breathe. Hours turned to days. The guilt that once drove him began to fade. He realized that by not reacting, he was breaking a cycle of manipulation that had lasted for years. His strategic silence wasn't just for him, it was for every future interaction. It was a declaration that his peace mattered more than his brother's games. Different contexts, romantic, professional, familial. Yet the same pattern emerges. The manipulator disappears when consistency is required. They reappear when validation is needed. They test with crumbs. They expect you to respond instantly. And the same trap, if you reply quickly, you erase all your progress. You confirm that their control is intact. You prove your silence was temporary. But in each of these stories, silence reversed the game. It wasn't about being cruel. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. The mirror reflected reality back at them. The fortress stood unshaken. Dignity replaced desperation. When you hear Sarah's midnight message, John's opportunist coworker, David's guilt-driven brother, you see yourself. You see how ordinary people just like you either collapse or stand firm. And you realize silence isn't theory, it's practice. That's the power of examples. They break illusions. They show you that silence doesn't cause collapse. In fact, silence reveals collapse, but on the other side, the manipulator falls apart, not you. Every unanswered message is not absence. It's presence. It's presence of strength, of boundaries, of dignity. Every time you resist the urge to reply, you're not just withholding words, you're building identity. You're saying, I am no longer defined by someone else's validation. I am no longer trained to jump when called. I am free. That's the essence of strategic silence. And when you see it proven in real lives, you realize it's not just possible, it's necessary. With these real-world cases, you can feel the shift. Now it's time to explore how philosophy, especially Stoicism, turns this practice into a way of life. So silence becomes more than a tactic. It becomes who you are. Up until now, we've dissected their behavior, their patterns, their tactics, their shame. But the real breakthrough happens when you shift the focus back to yourself. This is where philosophy enters. This is where Stoicism becomes your armor. The Stoics built their lives around one principle: you cannot control what others do, but you can always control how you respond. Epictetus, born a slave, and later one of the greatest teachers of freedom, said it most clearly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Their message, their silence, their sudden return. That's not the real problem. The problem is the meaning you attach to it. Their text is just an external event. Your interpretation of it, that's where the pain lives. Reframing is everything. Old frame. They texted me, maybe they still care. New frame. They texted me, they're testing if they still control me. Old frame. If I don't reply, I'll lose my chance. New frame. If I don't reply, I'll finally prove I've changed. This reframing is the Stoic shift. It takes what feels like a crisis and turns it into training. Suddenly, the late-night buzz isn't panic, it's practice. It's your moment to prove you're no longer their puppet. Seneca once wrote, "He who angers you conquers you." Let's adapt that he who rushes you rules you. That's exactly what the manipulator counts on. They thrive on urgency. They want your fast reaction, your flustered typing, your desperate paragraphs. Because urgency makes you predictable. And predictable people are easy to control. Silence disrupts this mechanism. Silence says, I am not rushed, I am not owned, I am not controlled. That is strategic silence in Stoic form. Patience as power. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, ruled armies and empires, yet he wrote endlessly about ruling himself. He described the mind as a citadel, a fortress no one could breach without your consent. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. A text message is an outside event. A ghost's return is an outside event. Neither can touch you unless you throw open the gates. And each time you practice silence, you keep those gates shut. You protect your citadel. Think of silence like weightlifting for the soul. The first rep is hard. The first unanswered message feels unbearable. But each rep builds strength. Each moment of restraint makes the next one easier. What once felt like torture becomes natural. What once felt like resistance becomes freedom. You stop flinching when the phone buzzes. You start smiling because now you see the test and you know you'll pass it. Many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it means not feeling anything. That's false. Stoicism isn't about being numb, it's about not being ruled by feelings. It's about choosing which emotions deserve action and which don't. When you practice indifference toward manipulation, you're not dead inside, you're free inside. You're saying, I can feel the pull, but I refuse to let it dictate my actions. And this indifference is exactly what breaks them. They expect anger. They expect longing. They expect attention. What they cannot process is calm detachment. Indifference creates cognitive dissonance. They expect one reaction and receive the opposite. That gap cracks their confidence. Most people think they only have two options: reply or ignore. Stoicism reveals a third choice reframe. You don't ignore to punish them. You don't reply to please them. You remain silent to train yourself. That's the power of strategic silence. It's not about them at all. It's about you. It's about proving to yourself that you've grown beyond desperation. Imagine Marcus Aurelius with a smartphone. Imagine Epictetus reading a midnight thinking of you. Their advice wouldn't change external events, don't control you. Only your judgments do. Marcus wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That's your blueprint. The pain of their silence wasn't caused by them. It was caused by your estimate. Change the estimate and you change the outcome. Here's the paradox. The manipulator who craves control is actually a slave to their ego, to their insecurity, to their addiction for validation. They ghost not because they're free, but because they're chained. They return not because they've grown, but because they're starving. You, on the other hand, have the chance to be master not of them, but of yourself. Master of your impulses, master of your responses, master of your dignity. And when you hold silence, you prove that mastery. This Stoic shift doesn't just protect you from manipulative messages. It spills into every corner of life. A rude coworker doesn't derail your day. A guilt-tripping relative doesn't shake your peace. A stranger online doesn't steal your energy. Strategic silence becomes more than a tactic. It becomes a lifestyle, a shield you carry everywhere. Here's the sweetest discovery: peace is addictive. At first, silence feels like suffering. But once you taste the calm of not reacting, you crave it more than you ever craved their attention. You realize that no breadcrumb, no apology, no fake affection can compete with the serenity of your own mind. That's the Stoic lesson. The person who governs themselves is freer than any emperor, richer than any king, stronger than any manipulator. Their silence was avoidance. Their message is a test. But your silence is mastery. And once you taste that mastery, you'll never confuse reaction with strength again. You'll know the fortress, you'll see the mirror, and you'll live the truth. The one who holds silence holds power. So far, we've exposed their tactics and reframed your perspective. But knowledge alone doesn't set you free. The shift happens when you take action. When silence moves from theory into practice. When you no longer just know you do. Picture this: tomorrow your phone buzzes. A familiar name flashes. Your heart pounds, your breath shortens. In that instant, you stand at a crossroads. Path 1, you react. You type too much, too soon, too emotionally. And with one tap of send, you hand them back the keys to your peace. Path 2, you pause. You breathe. You remember the fortress, the mirror, the Stoic citadel, and you choose strategic silence. This moment of choice is where empowerment begins. Your instinct will scream for release. You'll feel the silence as unbearable. But remember, discomfort isn't danger. It's training. Each second you hold back, you build strength. Every unanswered buzz is a rep for your inner discipline. Think of it as a muscle. The more you practice withholding the first word, the stronger you become. Closure is not something they give, it's something you decide. Waiting for them to explain is waiting for shackles. Their reasons won't heal you because their silence wasn't about you. It was about them. When you let go of closure, you take back your freedom. You realize you don't need their confession to move on. Your silence is closure enough. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are clarity. When you hold silence, you're not being cold, you're being clear. I will not be manipulated. I will not reward absence with attention. I will not let inconsistency have access to my peace. Say it to yourself. My fortress is not a prison, it is protection. Every minute spent drafting replies is a minute stolen from your growth. Silence doesn't just starve them, it feeds you. Redirect that energy, read, write, exercise, create, connect with people who value you. When you pour time into yourself instead of their chaos, you profit. Silence becomes not just absence of reply, but presence of growth. Ask yourself one question. If I reply, am I feeding their ego or protecting my peace? If the answer is ego, the choice is silence. If the answer is peace, silence remains the answer. This single filter clears away the fog. You no longer debate endlessly. You simply choose what preserves dignity. At first, silence feels unnatural. You'll fight the urge to just be polite. But remember, politeness in this context is self-betrayal. Every second of discomfort is proof that you're retraining your nervous system. The unease isn't a sign you're doing something wrong, it's a sign you're breaking free. Each time you resist, you flip the script. You stop being the one waiting, and they start waiting on you. You stop being the one chasing, and they start chasing shadows. Silence transforms you from victim to victor, not because they collapse instantly, but because you reclaim authorship of your own behavior. It will be hard. Your stomach will churn. Your mind will scream you're losing them. But listen carefully, you are not losing them. You are losing the illusion that they were ever yours. And illusions are worth losing. Each hour of silence builds a stronger self. Each day of silence builds deeper respect. And each week you'll look back and say, I can't believe I once surrendered so easily. The greatest power you can hold over someone who thrives on control isn't anger, hate, or revenge. It's indifference. Anger still gives them a place in your heart. Hate still makes them central. Revenge still ties you to their story. Indifference gives them nothing. That's why strategic silence is empowerment. It says your words no longer set the rhythm of my life. Your games no longer decide my peace. I am no longer your puppet. Here's the deeper truth. Every silent choice isn't just a tactic. It's a vote for who you are becoming. You are becoming disciplined. You are becoming clear. You are becoming untouchable. And untouchable doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you feel deeply, but you refuse to let desperation guide your actions. You act from dignity, not from craving. This is the identity shift. The old version of you, the one who begged, explained, and chased, is gone. In its place stands someone who doesn't just talk about philosophy, but lives it. Liberation doesn't arrive in a single dramatic moment. It arrives through repetition, through small, quiet victories stacked day after day. The first unanswered buzz feels heavy. The second feels lighter. By the 10th, you'll feel liberated. Strategic silence isn't one choice, it's a lifestyle. Every repetition proves that you're no longer someone who dances to another's tune. You've become the composer of your own rhythm. The beauty of empowerment is that it spreads. Friends notice you no longer collapse when the past reappears. Family sees you hold boundaries without guilt. Colleagues respect the way you refuse to be pulled into drama. Your silence becomes your reputation. People learn quickly this fortress doesn't open on demand. This mirror reflects truth, not desperation. Say it to yourself, I choose me. Not them, not their games, not their control. Me. This isn't selfishness, it's sanity. Because only when you guard your own peace can you build healthy connections with others. Only when you respect yourself can you attract respect in return. Your silence becomes a filter. It repels the manipulative. It attracts the genuine. That's how strategic silence reshapes not just your relationships, but your entire life. And now with empowerment in hand, we move into the crescendo, the climax where the tables turn completely, and silence not only protects you, but destroys their illusion of control. This is the moment everything turns. The hunter becomes the hunted. The manipulator becomes the desperate. And you, the one who once crumbled at every notification, become untouchable. Picture two parallel realities. Them restless, glued to their phone, scrolling, waiting. Their ego is starving. Their confidence cracks. They are desperate for a reaction, any reaction that proves they still matter. Their silence was never peace. It was avoidance. Their sudden message isn't love, it's hunger. And hunger is never satisfied for long. You calm, composed, focused. You're living your life working, growing, laughing, healing. Your days are measured not by notifications but by progress. Your nights are filled not with anxious waiting but with peace. Your silence isn't emptiness. It's abundance. This is the reversal. Once you were the desperate one analyzing every word, every emoji, every delay. Now they are the one consumed by questions. Why didn't they respond? Did they see it? Have they moved on? Am I no longer important? Here's the irony: they thought you were trapped. They believed their silence kept you chained, waiting. But in reality, it is they who are imprisoned in a cell built from insecurity, ego, and shame. You meanwhile stand in a fortress. And here's the difference: a prison confines, but a fortress protects. They are enslaved to impulses they can't control, while you are liberated by discipline you choose. That's the paradox of strategic silence. The one who craves control the most is the least free. The one who practices silence is the one truly untouchable. Silence cracks their reality. They expected urgency. They found patience. They expected longing. They found indifference. They expected paragraphs. They found nothing. That gap between what they expected and what they received creates dissonance so strong it rattles their identity. They check your social media. They study your last seen status. They ask mutual friends about you. But none of it matters, because the one thing they crave the reaction from you never arrives. Every unanswered buzz is another stone added to the fortress wall. Every withheld reply is another mirror turned toward their emptiness. Each act of silence shatters illusions. The illusion that they were still important. The illusion that they could always come back. The illusion that they owned you even from afar. These illusions are fragile, and silence is a hammer. With time, they are forced to see the truth: they never had control. They only had access, and access can be revoked. But this crescendo isn't just about their collapse. It's about your rebirth. Because the moment you realize you don't need a reply, you discover something deeper. You don't need them at all. You don't need their attention to feel valuable. You don't need their validation to feel worthy. You don't need their presence to feel whole. This is the heart of Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. Your silence proves that you've realized it. You've taken the power you once gave away and pulled it back inside. Do not underestimate how devastating this is for them. They feed on chaos. They thrive on reaction. Silence starves them. The void you create becomes unbearable. They may send follow-ups, apologies, anger, even fake emergencies. Each attempt more desperate than the last. But every attempt proves the same thing: you are no longer theirs to manipulate. That's why strategic silence destroys more completely than anger ever could. Because anger still says, "You matter." Silence says, "You no longer exist in my world." Every withheld reply builds toward one devastating conclusion: you no longer have power over me. This isn't shouted, it isn't typed, it isn't argued. It's communicated through absence, through calm, through silence that lasts hours, days, weeks. And that silence speaks louder than any speech. Here's the twist: they always believed they were the hunter and you were the prey. But through discipline, through restraint, through silence, the roles reverse. Now they are the one waiting, desperate, doubting. They are the one trapped in uncertainty, checking, obsessing. And you are free. This reversal isn't about cruelty. It isn't about revenge. It's about truth, about living in alignment with reality, about making sure no one ever dictates your peace again. Their collapse is loud. Your victory is quiet, but the contrast is undeniable. They are consumed by obsession. You are consumed by growth. They are restless in the night. You are resting in peace. They chase illusions. You embrace reality. This is liberation not from them, but from the need for them. Not from their silence, but from the meaning you once gave it. That's the final paradox. They thought their silence was power. In reality, your silence was freedom. And with this crescendo reached, there is only one step left, closing the loop. Wrapping every lesson into one powerful message and issuing a call to action that ensures viewers not only understand, but commit to living this truth. They always come back, but you don't always have to let them in. Their return isn't proof of love, it's proof of need. Their message isn't a gift, it's a test. And the only answer they cannot twist, manipulate, or weaponize is your silence. That is the Stoic truth. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't need their approval. Your calm life, your steady growth, your unshakable dignity, that is the victory. Because in the end, silence says everything. Silence declares, I am no longer yours to control. I am no longer the person who dances when summoned. I am free. So the next time your phone lights up with their name, pause. Don't rush. Don't explain. Don't beg. Let your silence speak. Because silence speaks louder than words. Silence is the fortress. Silence is the mirror. Silence is the ultimate proof that you've taken your power back. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because you know exactly who that is. And if you're ready to keep building this inner fortress, subscribe right now. Every week we break down toxic patterns, uncover the psychology behind manipulation, and teach you the Stoic strategies that make you emotionally untouchable. Finally, before you go, I want you to declare your commitment. Type one word in the comments, silence. Let that word be your promise to yourself, to your future, to your peace. Because the loudest voice isn't the one that shouts, it's the one that refuses to answer.